Prince William is going to leave Adelaide Cottage and move into Forest Lodge later this year. With the family currently having no live-in staff, do you think that will change when they move into a bigger property?
I wasn't kind of surprised the fact that he is moving house, because obviously future king, we need something a bit more substantial, and it's kind of similar to Highgrove, I think, with the looks of it. But the one thing I remember about him is that both him and Catherine are very hands-on. They do a lot of things themselves. They've been doing that now since that sentences have been gone, so for the last 14 years. So I don't really think that's going to change. They'll probably have somebody to help them with looking after the property, because again, change and kind of bathrooms to clean, so I can imagine that there will be some sort of housekeeper or housekeeping team. But as far as from a butler's point of view, I just don't see him somebody that kind of doing that kind of role just yet, because again, he's somebody that likes to kind of do things himself, so I just don't see him wanting to have a big household. And also they're still quite private.
If Prince William continues to have minimal staff, is the royal butler role at risk of becoming obsolete?
I think having less staff going forward and setting up the butler for William has become the kind of norm. And his father obviously had butlers, his grandmother, great-grandparents always had butlers. He said, I would say, that's not had a butler certainly at his age, and it's possible that maybe he may not have a butler fill that role. I think what he would have is somebody to help, because obviously when he becomes king, if you can imagine, there's a lot of uniforms and different clothes changes and things, so he would definitely need somebody to help him with that, and that's a valet's job. So I could almost see somebody coming into a role where maybe they help him with that side of it, and then potentially help when it's needed for dinner parties and things. That's the only thing that is possible that he might want to have.
Having held the role yourself, what are the benefits of having a royal butler for George, Charlotte and Louis?
Certainly the benefits of having a royal butler, especially from his kids' point of view, is it's always been said, in the way it was explained to me, that as a butler, and when you work in these households with a young family, the young family learn from the butler or butlers about the kind of things like how to lay tables and how to serve meals, and this is something that the aristocracy and royals are masters at. They understand about the etiquettes and the protocol. I mean, the Queen was great. She knew how to lay Queen Elizabeth knew how to lay tables. She knew exactly. She used to inspect the tables at the palace to make sure they were just right. And she learnt this certainly from staff members, and also when she was grown up having butlers around. So this is something that the younger royals will miss out on, and it could mean that they're missing out on some really valuable life lessons.
What reasons do you think are motivating Prince William's decision to raise his family away from London?
I think Prince William wanting to raise his family away from London doesn't really surprise me, because they're quite a private family. They like the space, they like the peace and quiet. But I've also noted that the king isn't really using London, using the way they, and he seems to do a lot of audiences, dinners at Windsor, and I'm wondering if it's possible, and it's just a possibility, maybe the time's coming that the courts permanently get moved from London, especially with the renovation work at Buckingham Palace, getting moved to Windsor, because I mean they have moved royal residencies before. Like Christmases used to be at Windsor, then they get moved to Sandringham. So it's possible that this is just another big move, and it's maybe the future of the monarchy. Why wanted to be to have the word royal but with a small r, so maybe moving it, the family name is Windsor, Windsor Mountbatten, so it kind of does make sense if he does decide to, both he and his father decide that maybe that's where the kind of hub, if you like, of monarchy is in the future.
If Prince William decides to stay in Forest Lodge when he becomes king, is Buckingham Palace at risk of becoming increasingly empty?
I think if William does make Windsor his kind of permanent residence, all it would mean is that it will certainly be the office. It always will be the home of the monarchy, but it would become the home of the monarchy, the office, but it would also be opening up to the public, maybe full time, a bit like some of the other royal residences in Europe, so people can visit all the time. And William would probably still come here to carry out engagements, investitures, different events, but it would become more of a tourist attraction, I think.
How did you become a butler to the royal family, and would you recommend this career to the younger generation?
I became a butler to the royal family documentary in 1992 when I saw Queen Elizabeth, and I thought, wouldn't she be an amazing character to get to know or to dance with, which was my kind of dream to do. And luckily, many years later, I got to obviously work for them and got to dance with the Queen. And when people say to me, is it a job that I would recommend? You get to meet, you get to do things, you get to experience things that you would never normally get to experience. As I say, from meeting world famous people, celebrities, politicians, getting to kind of walk in along corridors that you would never normally get to kind of see, kind of behind the scenes. I mean, it's another world, and very few get to witness that other world, and I'm one of the lucky few. So if the opportunity comes along, I think, you know, it's a great profession.
And you mentioned meeting famous people. Who's the most famous person, or your favourite person that you met, you know, during your job?
I think the most famous person I met during my job, well, obviously I'd have to say the Queen, because that's who I idolised. But if we were talking about not about the royal family, possibly Neil Diamond would be one of the most famous. But I hate to admit that I didn't actually recognise him when I met him, and I actually asked what he did. So that was a bit of a faux pas, but yeah, he was certainly one of the bigger names. But for me, meeting my idol, which was Queen Elizabeth, was the kind of icing on the cake, if you like, for working for the royal family.
What surprised you the most about Queen Elizabeth?
The one thing that surprised me about the Queen, which is not what I expected, was her humour. The fact she had such a great sense of humour, and she would catch you off guard. I mean, I've told this story about once going to announce dinner to her, and she left the room, and the rest of the royal family and guests hadn't noticed that she'd left the room, and because of that she ran down this corridor to get into the dining room before them, because it's a breach of protocol, but she was doing it for fun. And I ran down this corridor with her, which I never in a million years thought I'd ever have to do. I say ran, I kind of trotted, I didn't want to overtake her. And that's when I thought, you know, what an amazing sense of humour she has, and other members of the family. And that was unexpected. I had no idea that working for her and working for the family would be so much fun.
What surprised you the most about becoming a royal butler?
I think what surprised me most about being a royal butler was the amount of times that I got invited to things, you know, to different parties and balls at the palace, and, as I say, dancing with the Queen, to getting invited to the King's wedding, which I never even expected to get invited to his wedding. So it was always quite fun to kind of get invited to things, and so you got to know them from that point of view, as well as being a butler. So it was quite unusual, but it was great fun. You just had to kind of know how to kind of switch between the two, from being a guest at an event to going back to being a butler.
And so were you a guest at the King's wedding?
I was a guest at the King's wedding, yeah, King Charles and Queen Camilla.
What's your main memory from that event?
My main memory from that event, I think I'd have to say it would be, the Queen's speech, because her speech was very funny. And she made a comment about the fact she'd given up to be at the races to be at the wedding, which everybody kind of had a kind of giggle about. And another great memory was Mary Strathmore, who was a great friend, one of the Strathmore family, which is relatives of the King, who was also my referee when I went for the job for the King. I chaperoned her, which was really nice, because many years before, when again I was about 12 years old, I wrote to her and asked if I could buy the family castle. And luckily she said no, but we can be friends, and that friendship continued until she died recently. But that's one of my great memories, is actually getting to spend the day of the King's wedding with her, kind of socialising as you do. So it was great fun.